Oh, hey guys. So this is going to be a very short video actually, because there's just not too much here. Um, I wanted to just go through it though, with you and talk about it, but I think it's only about 4 or 5 slides. Like it's really going to be a short video, but let's do this anyway. Okay. So Darren Henson is now claiming against Lance Bass. The reason is that, well, the amended complaint alleges that Bass partnered with Marriott to host an interactive fan experience in which he taught the choreography without a valid license and profited from doing so. Now, this is a direct infringement theory. Now, obviously, Lance Bass has performed this routine as part of live performances for NSYNC, and that is one thing to have that permission to do that. That is like, specific under specific circumstance type of agreement. That does not mean that Lance Bass or any member of NSYNC has the right to then start charging fans to have lessons in how to do the choreography, especially when the choreographer has his own video out doing exactly that. So he's gone beyond the bounds of the kind of, you know, the explicit permission he would have had to perform the routine. Now, Bass allegedly performed and taught the choreography publicly for commercial gain. This is a textbook public performance under Section 106, subsection 4. Okay, so what are the strengths? Well, there's direct exploitation for profit, the cleanest form of infringement. Bass holds no license from Sony. Okay, he is not, unlike Epic Games and Marvel, Richmond Street Productions. Lance Bass is not actually alleged to have been, licensed by Sony to do this. The complaint also alleges affirmative commercial conduct, not passive or incidental use. So he didn't just turn up and just start to perform the routine for nothing. Basically, he did actually make money from this. The choreography is alleged to be copyrightable. Why? Because Henson actually holds the copyright. Teaching it satisfies public performance. Weaknesses, though, the complaint lacks a formal substantial similarity analysis. So, we don't know. We can assume it will be identical because this is a member of NSYNC teaching the dance routine that was created specifically for an NSYNC song. We can assume that there is substantial similarity in the sense that it is the entire identical routine that he was once taught by Darren Henson. But the complaint doesn't actually allege that or provide any kind of evidence. And there was no videos. This was an event in, I want to say, I can't remember where it was. I'm thinking of Brazil, but that's not Lance Bass. That was Nick Pauly. Yes, this is in California, an event in a Marriott in California. Okay. Bass may argue reasonable belief that NSYNC held some rights under like an industry custom because, as I said, Lance Bass was part of NSYNC. NSYNC, the dance was created for use with their song, and they have performed it, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times in various live performances. So Lance Bass may have had a reasonable belief that he wasn't doing anything wrong. But as I said before, it is one thing to be performing the routine when you're performing the song. It is another thing then to go and, teach, basically sell your dance skills to teach others the routine. Because then you are commercializing it. And the other weakness is the use may be characterized as de minimis, depending on duration and audience size. So, my overall assessment was moderate to strong, but in my opinion, Lance Bass is not the primary target. His exposure is real, but it's limited in scope relative to, the corporate defendants, i.e., Sony, Epic Games, and Richmond Street Productions. So, Bass's viable defenses. Again, some of them will sound ridiculous, but as they are defenses, I am just putting them up there and explaining why I don't think they'll apply. So he's got several potential arguments ranging from very weak to genuinely competitive. Understanding their relative strength is essential to assessing settlement leverage and litigation risk. So implied license is his strongest defense. He can argue that NSYNC performed the choreography publicly with Henson's blessing for 25 years without objection, and he would be absolutely right to do that. He could argue that industry custom treats choreography taught to performers as implicitly licensed, and that he reasonably believed that promotional fan engagement fell within that license. It's not a slam dunk, but it is the most credible argument available to him. Statute limitations. I don't think this applies. The US Copyright Act has a 3-year limitation rule, with the clock running from when the plaintiff knew or should have known of the infringement. The event occurred in July 2024, well within the statute of limitations. So, there we go. That one's dead. Fair use, very weak. Teaching the dance at a paid fan event is commercial, non-transformative, and targets the heart of the work, directly substituting for Henson's own paid workshops. Just put this out here. Lance Bass was teaching the dance, not the song that NSYNC recorded and sung. He was teaching Darren Henson's choreography. All 4 factors weigh against Bass. Fair use is extremely unlikely to succeed. And then we have de minimis and innocent infringement. Now, de minimis is fact dependent. The complaint alleges full exploitation, making this difficult. Innocent infringement does not eliminate liability but could reduce statutory damages. Bass may argue that he relied on industry norms and had no knowledge of Henson's exclusive ownership claim. It may be that Sony said, hey, we hold the license for the video, so, the dance is in the video. Comparative exposure, so Bass versus the corporate defendants, just to give you a visual, I guess, of where I think Lance Bass sits in this compared to the other defendants I've done videos on so far. And obviously this does not include Nick Pauley or any other potential future defendants. So against Sony Music have the highest exposure. I've said that in several videos. I stand by it. Allegedly licensed rights they did not own as the source of the entire chain of infringing licenses. Sony faces potential upstream liability for all downstream infringement, and that is the key point. Across every defendant. So Sony are the ones who gave out licenses. They are responsible not only for their own upstream liability, but for all downstream infringement. So anyone they gave a license to who is also infringed, Sony are also liable for that. Epic Games, enormous. Used the entire choreography as a Fortnite emote, sold to millions of users globally. The use was continuous, monetized, and widely distributed. They licensed from Sony, but Sony allegedly lacked authority to grant that license. And I have to say allegedly because they may still, reach into a wizard's hat and pull out a magic signed agreement from way back in 1999. I don't think they go into, but it could happen. Marvel / Richmond Street. Major. They incorporated the choreography into the opening sequence of Deadpool and Wolverine, which was the highest grossing movie of 2024. It Ends With Us was the second highest. They used it in global marketing, hired Nick Pauly, to perform it publicly. Theatrical release and promotional tie-ins compound the exposure significantly. So this is not just some movie that bombed. This is the highest grossing movie of all of 2024, and arguably one of the highest ever. It was a huge movie. So think about all the people who actually watched that opening sequence. And now you can buy it on Sky. So then we got Lance Bass. In my opinion, is the smallest fish here. So one-time live event that we know of. I have to go on what the complaint says. At the moment, there's only a one-time live event. There may be discovery that says actually he's done it more than once, several times. He's got a book out with all the dance moves, and he's monetized it on his TikTok or whatever. There may be other things that come, but right now we're going off a one-time live event, small audience, limited revenue, no ongoing distribution, mass reproduction, or global dissemination. So for me, the exposure regarding Lance Bass is the lowest of all the name dependents by a considerable margin. In fact, taking out any in-sync live performances, Lance Bass has done less than Nick Pauly. I've got quite a bit to go through when I do his video next. Final takeaways. Now there is one more slide. A clear picture of relative exposure and strategic priorities emerges from the analysis. The litigation team should calibrate resources and settlement strategy accordingly. Bass is the smallest fish. His alleged conduct was a single small-scale, low-revenue event with no ongoing exploitation. While his liability is real, it is peripheral to the core case. Settlement on modest terms is the most efficient path, and I would hope so, because it's a shame that 25 years later, because he's obviously friends with Henson, has worked with Henson, and 25 years later we are here where he's a named defendant in a lawsuit by Henson. I understand Henson's position, absolutely. And, at the end of the day, he may be just making the point that no infringement is too small, and he will take it seriously and bring people before a court if it happens. But I can see that he's probably likely to be content to settle with Bass, even if it's, even if no money exchanges. I think that's what's going to happen. But I do think Henson's making a point. Hey, this is my work. No, you can't just do it. Even NSYNC can't just do what they want with it and monetize it. And that's absolutely fair. I think people have taken liberties, but obviously Deadpool and Wolverine and everything that kind of stemmed from that, including Fortnite and everything else, it went too far. I think he's been reasonable and allowed people to do stuff with his work. But when you've got people now calling this the Deadpool dance and, crediting Nick Pauly for it, I can understand why Darren Henson's just, fuck us, I've had enough. I'm going to make the world realize this is my dance, my art. I did this work. And if I was him, I would do exactly the same. His best argument, Lance Bass's, is implied license. So it's the only real defences that carry any genuine litigation risk. Implied license in particular draws on 25 years of industry practice and may resonate with a sympathetic finder of fact. So that'd be a jury if every trial does come to fruition, or a judge. Both warrant serious attention in any rebuttal brief. And then we have Epic and Marvel present orders of magnitude more exposure. Okay, so global distribution, mass monetization, and continuous exploitation dwarf Bass's one-off event. Litigation firepower should be concentrated on these defendants and on Sony as the alleged source of the invalid licensing chain, and I agree. So the recommended next step, prepare a work-for-hire rebuttal brief grounded in facts pleaded in the amended complaint to neutralise that potential defence early. So I'm expecting to hear from, well, all of the defendants. They all have a right to reply. So now there was one other point I think is important to highlight. And I'm in no way suggesting Darren Henson, come and get your guy. Lance Bass at that event in question was not the only member of NSYNC teaching that dance routine for money. I did a bit of research and found this. This is a photo from the event. Joey Fatone was also there performing the routine and teaching the choreography. So, in theory, it's very plausible that Henson could also add him as Joey Fatone as a defendant. I don't know if he will, but I will put a link to this page. Actually, I'm just trying to screen share something. There we go. Have we got it? Yeah, there we go. So this is an article by Pop Sugar. It is dated August the 2nd, 2024. So this is not long, a week or so after the Marriott thing. So where is it? Yes. If you ever get the chance to learn the Bye 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 choreography alongside former members of NSYNC, just say yes, I did. On the day of the dance class based in West Hollywood, California, Lance Bass walked down the staircase at the Heart WeHo nightclub first. Okay, and we know that this is the right event because in the complaint it refers to Heart WeHo. Bandmate and longtime friend Joey Fatone made a surprise appearance shortly afterwards, joining Bass for a mini NSYNC reunion. Okay. And then this is the author. They then say, I step onto the dance floor surrounded by sparkling disco balls and NSYNC themed cocktails. So this is an NSYNC themed thing. It wasn't it was nothing to do with Deadpool and Wolverine. Yeah, so then they talk about going through the Bye 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 dance move step by step. Oh. And they do acknowledge that the Bye 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 dance is trending on social media thanks to a revival in Deadpool. But they do, but the writer of this article says still a lot's changed since the band first learned the choreography back in 2000. What I would take an issue here is there is still no mention of Darren Henson. When they could have said still a lot's changed since the band first learned the choreography back in 2000 as taught by choreographer Darren Henson. It was something to just acknowledge this man's work. But no, there's nothing here. So yeah, and that's where this picture come from. You can see, the photographer is credited. Betsy Newman, courtesy of Marriott International. So that is definitely that event. There you go. So yes, in theory, Darren Henson would be well within his rights to also sue Joey Fatone. Am I recommending that? I'm not particularly, actually. But, he would on the same grounds. Now, whether Darren Henson was aware that Joey Fatone was also at the same event, I don't know. that may be something he's trying to ascertain as part of, you know, the where he said in his amended complaint there will be other does added in the future, but we are still, you know, doing basically still working out who's done what. So yeah, there we go. It was not just Lance Bass at that event. Joey Fatone was also there. So there we go. Let me know what you think. I'm going to do Nick Pauly next because I will then do follow up then with a video. I don't know whether I'm doing Ryan Reynolds and Sean Levy together as one or separately. It will probably be together as one. But I've got some strong reasons why I think certainly that Ryan Reynolds will be pulled into this. I'm not so sure about Sean Levy. Possible, but definitely Ryan Reynolds.